one of the variants of my incident command system presentations that I do for all sorts of different purposes to different groups. So this one's just for you guys. Applying ICS to ARES racing's responses. So basically, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, that's right, I'm supposed to talk to this side of the screen, because he's off camera over here, but basically what I just want to kind of briefly go over some of the ICS misconceptions and misnomers and egos and all sorts of different things that you hear about, and really giving you an overview of ICS to try and explain that ICS is more than just simply an organizational chart or a scheme that you use for who supervises who. It really is a management tool, and that's what we really do use it for in emergency response. It's designed to help you think of all the things that need to be thought of to manage through objectives, so that, as we talked about a few months ago when we brought up some of these scenarios, and everyone kind of went, oh my God, I never thought of that, never thought of having to do that, or never thought of, that consideration. The incident command system is laid out, it's designed to help you think of all those things before they become an issue, so that you can really take charge of the situation rather than just crisis manage. I always say we really want to be able to lead in a disaster rather than just sort of put out all the little fires as they pop up. We want to be in control of the situation, and the incident command system is designed to help us do that. So we're going to just go over a few things, go over a little overview, just kind of apply it briefly to a scenario, and then maybe tongue-in-cheek reviewing our newfound confidence at the end. So, ICS, it's all about the organizational chart. Oh, it's a slow computer. No, it's not all about the organizational chart. You'll see that in just a minute, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the organizational chart. The other thing that I hear all the time that drives me crazy is that ICS is for firefighters and cops, not us. That's also not true. And my personal favorite, trust me, I took those 1, 2, 7, and 800 courses. I'm a professional now. And I hear that come out of people's mouths all the time. And really is a red flag for me personally when I'm operating. When somebody is overly confident in their abilities because they took a couple courses online, that's always a big red flag for me. I'd much rather hear them talk about how they're going to use their ICS to manage through objectives. Maybe if they told me that, I'd be much more impressed. So no, it's not about the 1, 2, 7, and 800 courses that you took online. So what's ICS really all about? First and foremost, it's about accountability and safety. And if the organizational chart is about anything, it's about that unity of command and making sure that everybody knows who they're responsible to, so that there can be that accountability so that mistakes don't get made that ultimately get people killed. And I know that that may not be as big of a concern for ARES races, but in the fire service, that's certainly a big concern. If you don't know your chain of command, that's how people die. So if the organizational chart is for one very important thing, it's that. The ICS also has a major objective about improving communications. We're going to have a little bit of fun with that in a minute. It talks about span of control, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And of course, management by objective, which is the most important piece of the incident command system. So accountability, safety, and unity of command via a flexible organizational structure, which if you've taken the fancy 100, 200, 700, 800 courses online, you should be somewhat familiar with the basic chart that talks about, we always have an incident commander in ICS, and they decide stuff. This is the really easy way to remember who does what. The incident commander decides stuff. The operations section does stuff. The planning section knows stuff. The logistics section gets stuff, and the finance and admin people pay for stuff. And it's really that simple. Those are the things you have to think about when you're running a disaster. You have to think about, someone's got to decide what's going on. Someone needs to do it. Someone needs to plan for it. That's that management by objectives. We'll talk a whole bunch about this. Someone needs to plan about it. Someone needs to think ahead. Someone needs to think about who's going to staff it. Do they have the stuff to staff it? So who's going to get the radio operator from Kewaunee County or Brown County to come down and help us? And are they going to bring an HT along with them? That's what logistics would do. And then finance and admin would pay for stuff, or maybe more accurately, they would keep track of our expenses. Because a lot of this stuff, a lot of the expenses we could incur as a group may be reimbursable through something like emergency management or a public assistance FEMA declaration or something like that. But if we didn't keep track of it, if we didn't document those expenses and make copies of receipts and things like that, guess what? We're not going to get reimbursed. So finance and admin is just as important as operations. We need to do all of these things. We don't necessarily have to have a person in all these things, but we need to do all of these things. So that's what I mean when I say the org chart isn't necessarily about plunking a person into a position. It's about what do we need to do as a group to manage an incident. So just a little bit of expansion on that. In larger incidents, an incident commander could have these positions working for him or her. The liaison officer who communicates with agencies, the public information officer who communicates with the public, and the safety officer who ensures safety of responders. Again, incident commander doesn't need to have a person in all these things, but if he or she doesn't, they need to do them themselves. They need to think about those things all the time because that's a key component to being the guy in charge, is doing those three things. So maybe a little bit about, I didn't quite fit this into the slides anywhere, but people will often say, well, my group falls under, this section or that section. I think, Fred, at the last meeting, you said, well, I think ARES RACES falls into the logistics section, which could be true because logistics does provide communications for an incident. But that's only going to be true if the fire department incident commander and his or her organizational structure, or the unified command that's maybe a police officer and a firefighter that are jointly doing the command group, that's only true if they have a logistics section that's willing to run ARES RACES. Well, how often do you think that's going to happen? Probably not, unless we have a big level whatever incident management team here that's used to running big wildfire operations or something like that. Most of the incident management teams and the incident command structures that the government entity would set up are not equipped to run the operations of subgroups like ARES RACES. That's when we set up our own incident command structure. Maybe it's only 2 people. But it's 2 people who are thinking about doing all these things. So how would we then interface with the incident command structure that the fire or police department has set up? Well, that would be through this liaison function up at the top. So we may need to run our own incident command structure to think about our internal priorities as an organization, and it would liaison with the incident command structure that the police or fire department has set up. Does that make sense? This is very similar to what a lot of organizations do, the Red Cross included, where we have incident command and we use the incident command principles, but our organizational priorities are complex enough that the overall incident command system that the county or state or city government has set up is probably not equipped to run and make those decisions. We have much more specific priorities. So we just liaison with and interface with that the government incident command structure. We want to make sure that what we're doing doesn't conflict in any way, which is why we want to have real open lines of communication here at the liaison position. But we can still use the system ourselves. So that's just a word on that. So question, how many workers would be required to fill this organizational chart right here?
One or more.
One. Exactly. If you've got one guy who shows up with a radio and he or she is representing Manitowoc County Amateur Radio Emergency Services, he or she is doing all these things. If he's the only one. If he's the only one to run that incident, he's got to think about all those priorities. That's not ideal, obviously. But some things are so small that, maybe all you want to dedicate to this sort of leadership aspect is one or two people. Maybe you have an incident commander who's thinking about these things and is thinking about these things, and then one other person who's really leading the operations. That's something that's a model we commonly use. You have one guy who's the incident commander, one person who's thinking about the big picture and setting objectives and doing all sorts, keeping track of expenses and all that kind of stuff. And then you have one person who's really more down in the weeds, leading the field operations. And that model actually works quite well for incidences of fairly, significant size. It's only when things get really, really large that you're really going to start plugging people into a lot of these different positions. So span of control is one of those tools that ICS sets up so that it can fulfill its objective. It's optimal span of control, 3 to 7, 5 being optimal. That means that an average person can supervise 3 to 7 people with an optimum being about 5. Any less than 3, it gets annoying. Any more than 7, it's too big of a task. So if we had a structure like this, where we had 5 workers out in the field, sorry that's down there a little low for you, John. If we had 5 workers out in the field, and we had somebody in each of these sections, but not here, we might not want to pull that piece out. We might need this piece to separate these 5 people from the incident commander. Otherwise, that span of control might start to get a little tight, because you'd have 5, 6, 7, 8 people that the incident commander would be supervising. That's why you'd like to have an operations section chief to provide that buffer. So now the incident commander is only supervising 4 people, and the ops section chief is supervising 5 people. So that's how you can have span of control in the back of your mind and fill positions sometimes only when they're needed to break up that chain. If you've got 20, 30 guys out in the field providing communications, they can't all be reporting up to one person. That just doesn't work. You've got to somehow break that down a little bit to make it more manageable. So another way that we can do that is through, under the operations section, we can have branches. Under branches, we can have groups or divisions. And under a group or a division, we can have a straight team or a task force. The differences are sort of subtle, but it is important because of the standard terminology piece. So a group is an arrangement for a purpose. A division is an arrangement geographically. So if we had an incident where we had 2 separate cities that were both equally impacted by an incident, we could split our operations section up into a City A division and a City B division. And that way that would help to split up the span of control a little bit to make it a more manageable thing so that we don't get burnout all the way up We don't lose track of people, we don't have safety issues, we don't have people that are frustrated because they don't know what's going on because they're not getting any directive from someone in charge. That's what happens when you've got one person supervising way too many people. A group would be like, maybe it's an incident where we're supporting 5 different fire stations for a task that they're working to accomplish, and we're supporting 5 different hospitals for a task that they're working to accomplish. We could have a fire station group and a hospital group. Basically the same concept, but if we're going to use a standard terminology, groups are purpose-based, divisions are geographical-based. And then strike teams and task forces, that gets even a little bit more subtle than that. A strike team is identical resources with one mission. A task force is different resources with one mission. So here's an example of a strike team. 5 guys with handheld radios going out to communicate. And someone from County Public Health, all to accomplish an outreach visit to a home. That group of 3 people that have a common goal but different missions, different resources, that would be a task force. Their task is the same, but the resources within it are different. But if you want to use the standard terminology, that's how you do it. The point is, the overriding point is that this is how you can further divide your org chart to maintain a span of control of 3 to 7 people, so that we don't get crabby people and burnt out people and all that good stuff. Improve communication through common terminology. So we have a medical response vehicle, we have a group of soldiers, we have a law enforcement vehicle, and we've got some cheerleaders. What are all those things?
Squads.
They are all squads, that's right. So if you get on the radio and you say, I'd like a squad to come down here to the incident command post, and you get a group of cheerleaders,
you got what you asked for.
you got what you asked for, that's right. That's right.
Uniforms.
So, subtle. But do you think this causes a problem and a really big disaster where you got a cop on a radio and a paramedic on a radio and they both ask for a squad? It's important, because if you get the wrong resource, you could be in a lot of trouble. What do those 2 things have in common?
Yeah. Both rigs.
Well, they're both rigs, that's right. So if you ask on the radio, I need a rig down here, this one's broken, and you get a 53-foot semi-trailer, you shouldn't be surprised.
And he could be a CB'er too.
He could be a CB'er, that's right. I didn't put any words on here, but what do we call that thing? It's an HG. What the heck does that stand for? Okay, I don't know that. I'm a fire department incident commander. That's a portable. I call it nothing other than a portable. That's a portable. You shouldn't use acronyms during a disaster, because acronyms mean totally different things to different organizations. At Red Cross, we have an acronym called the DOC. Okay, I'm going to call the DOC to get some advice on that. Well, the DOC is our Disaster Operations Center in Washington, D.C. You tell a cop you're going to call the DOC, they think you're calling down to the Department of Corrections. Okay? 2 different messages. So that's why we want to avoid using those acronyms. We want to use plain language and understand that different people call different things, different names. The reason it's a bit of an oxymoron is because we use the acronym ICS all the time. And ICS has its own set of acronyms, but we really should not use it.
So what would a good acronym be for that? Handheld 2-meter radio?
You could say a handheld radio transceiver or something like that, sure. Just be aware of it, I guess is my point. Be aware that different people call things differently. One of the other ways that the ICS helps to improve communications is through this tool called an ICS 205, or Incident Radio Communications Plan.
So what this tool is designed to do, particularly in the public safety realm, with radio interoperability, but certainly should be a tool for ARES RACES as well, is it allows you at the beginning of a shift, or what they call an ICS, operational period, at the beginning of an operational period, you use this tool to establish what frequencies, with PL tones and offsets and all that good stuff, what frequencies you intend to use for what different functions, what different purposes. And every single worker on the operation, without exception, receives a copy of this tool, along with other forms and other pieces of information in what's called an incident action plan. The incident action plan is all the instructions for everyone on the incident for that next operational period. So everybody has an awareness and an understanding that if I need this or I need that, this is the frequency I am to use. If that frequency goes down, this is the frequency that is to be the backup. Because guess what? When the radio goes down, you can't all collaborate to make the backup up, right? You got to know that in advance. And that's what the ICS 205 is designed to do. Everybody should get a copy of the ICS 205A, which is called a communications list. The 205A is where we might do things like, I can copy that too for you. We might do things like set up all the names of the people participating, what their assigned role is, and how do I get a hold of them? And a lot of times that would be, what's their cell phone number, but for ARES RACES groups, we could also put in things like what's their amateur call sign, perhaps if they have an HT with them, or a portable with them, or a handheld transceiver with them, what bands they have access to. It depends on the situation. It depends on the situation what you're all going to put on here. But it's important when you set up and you send your troops out that they all know who everyone else is and what their phone numbers are, etc. And that's what this form is for. And they're all made up names in alphabetical order. Here's what I call the meat and potatoes piece of this whole thing. Management by objectives. This is where 9 response organizations out of 10, 9 disasters out of 10, we fail the most. Because we run out, we have this thing happen, and it's before our eyes, and we have the situation, and we all run out and we try and do the best we can to mitigate that situation. But we fail to plan. We fail to sit down at some point, maybe not right away, but we fail to sit down at some point and say, what are our goals here? What do we hope to accomplish in the next 12 hours, or the next 6 hours, or the next 24 hours, or maybe the next 3 days? That's what's called your operational period, and it can be any length of time you choose. But at some point, you've got to sit down and say, what is it that we need to do? What are our objectives? And then you go through a process. After those objectives have been set, you say, what's more specifically, what tactics would we need to use to accomplish those objectives? So for ARES RACES, an objective might be something really big and broad, like provide communications for both hospitals. Provide communications between the EOC and Wisconsin Emergency Management. Okay, that's our high-level objective for the next operational period. Then we would think to ourselves, what tactics would we need to use? One tactic might be send one trained radio operator to Holy Family Hospital because they already have a radio installed. And then another tactic might be send one trained radio operator with a field box to Aurora because they don't have a radio installed. And the tactic for providing communications from the EOC is send one trained radio operator. You get the idea. Tactics are the more specific things that make the objective happen. Okay, so then you look at your list of tactics and you say, what do we need to accomplish that? and you evaluate that against what you have. So you look at, you add up, all right, so we said we were going to send an operator to Holy Family and an operator to the EOC and an operator to Aurora. That's 3 people. Do we have 3 people? Yep, we have 3 people. Good, we can go with that tactic. We said we needed 1 field box. Do we have a field box? Yep, good, we can go with that tactic. What if we didn't? What if we didn't have 3 people? Then we would have to decide, well, between now and then, logistics would have to say, yes, I can get 1 additional radio operator. Because I've already made some calls and I've already scouted out, Calumet County can send 2 guys over if need be, or Brown County can send 2 guys over. So yes, I can provide 1 additional radio operator. Or I can get from the Sheboygan group a few extra handheld transceivers. So the logistics section is thinking about what we might need. And then as we set our objectives, they're evaluating and saying, yes, I can get that, no, I can't get that. And if they can't, guess what? We need to go back and change our tactics and provide the service a different way. Maybe we have to scale back. Maybe we have to say, we simply can't provide communications to all those points. We don't have the resources. So go back to the people who asked us to do that and have them prioritize, and we can adjust our objectives and then work through the process again to come up with a plan that we can accomplish. So the tool that we use for this planning process is called the Planning P, which you've probably seen if you took the online classes but maybe didn't really understand. Or maybe you did for the 5 minutes while you were taking the class and it was gone. So the Planning P is designed to walk you through this process, starting with the initial incident. The base of the P, the leg of the P, recognizes the fact that it is not possible at the immediate onset of a disaster to immediately jump in headfirst and accomplish this process. This process takes time to establish. While you're in the leg of the P, that is that phase where everybody is, in the fire service, they would say, performing life safety and property protection type operations. They are mitigating the immediate dangers that have to be done. That's when you're just using your training and you're acting to put out the little fires as they happen. But at some point during that chaos phase, a group of leaders gets together and says, all right, let's get together, let's talk about what we need to accomplish, let's set some objectives, and think about what we're going to do for the first operational period, which will start in 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is. They work their way through that process I set up before. If you look at the red squares, they develop objectives, which are the high-level sorts of goals. They boil that down to more specific tactics. And then at the planning meeting is when they sit and they do all these comparisons and they say, this tactic will work because it requires resources A, B, and C, and we have resources A, B, and C, or we can get resources A, B, and C before this plan will take effect. And then after they match up all the resources with all the different tactics, they actually will write out work assignments. So they'll write up a work assignment for the guy who's going to go to Aurora Hospital, and they'll put in there details like report to the emergency room entrance, set up field box in the lobby, whatever the details might be. And they bundle all those work assignments that spell out, Operator John Smith is assigned the field box. These are his special instructions. This is who is going to replace him. This is who he should call if he has problems. Here's his contact at Aurora. All that kind of stuff gets put into that work assignment. All those work assignments get bundled together into a packet, along with things like that communications plan, that phone list, maybe a map of the incident, safety message, all those types of things that a new person coming on duty would need to know. You put all those things together, staple them together, And then the last part on the base of the P where it says execute plan, or I'm sorry, at the operations briefing, everybody who's going to work that next period gets handed a packet. They're briefed on that packet. Everybody in a room together. They're sent out to do their mission. That's called an incident action plan, or an IAP. All those pieces of paper together. If you have written a good IAP as a leader or a leadership team, you should be able to literally fall off the face of the earth and have your workers out there with their incident action plans accomplish their job, because all their instructions should be in that packet. They should not have to come back to you and ask all sorts of questions continuously through the operational period.
So at this point in the presentation, Travis kind of walked us through setting up an ICS for a mock scenario related to the mock scenario we had last time, which was a tornado. And so we set up an incident command and assigned a few people in different positions. And at the end of that, we basically agreed that the next meeting we do, we're going to go through another one of those where we set it up. And then possibly we'll be able to use this during December's training, which is the nuclear training.
That's all, folks.